Um, Welcome to today's deep dive. We're really thrilled to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We've got a really fascinating one today.
We do, because today we are tearing into something that, at least at first glance, might just look like a standard kind of dry stack of corporate compliance paperwork.
Right, the kind of thing most people just skim and sign.
Exactly. But once you peel back the layers, it is actually a meticulously engineered blueprint for keeping human beings alive in highly volatile environments.
It really is. It's a matter of life and death, frankly.
So, to get specific, we are examining an internal safety training document from the ABM Pilibhit construction site. Specifically, we are looking at their roles and responsibilities of key personnel manual.
And that's revision 00, stamped for the year 2025.
Right. And our mission today is to figure out how massive, complex industrial projects actually keep people safe. Because this compliance manual lays out an incredible chain of command designed to achieve what they call a zero harm vision.
Right. It's a phenomenal piece of organizational architecture.
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at massive industrial construction projects, we usually tend to focus on the tangible engineering, you know.
Oh, sure, the cranes and the steel.
Exactly. The pouring of thousands of yards of concrete. But we rarely step back to consider the invisible behavioral architecture that's required to keep the people building those structures from being killed.
And that's what this document is?
Yeah, this compliance manual is that invisible architecture. It removes every ounce of ambiguity about who is accountable for what.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't merely a corporate wish list or a set of polite suggestions. The ABM Pilibhit site is operating under a massive, overlapping web of legal requirements.
Massive is an understatement.
Right. We are talking about an absolute alphabet soup of heavy-hitting regulatory frameworks that govern every single movement on that dirt.
The sheer density of the regulatory environment there is just staggering. I mean, for anyone operating at the Pilibhit site, they are navigating 4 distinct major legal frameworks simultaneously.
4 of them.
Yeah. You have OSHA, which is standardizing the physical tactics, then ISO 45001, the 2018 version, which is driving the overarching management system.
And then the local ones, right?
Correct. The BOCW Act of 1996 and the Factories Act of 1948.
So for you listening, think about your own workplace for a second. If you've ever managed a multi-tiered compliance system in your own career, you already know the friction that happens between a high-level audit and the daily operational reality.
Oh, absolutely. There's always friction.
But in an office setting, that friction is usually just, an administrative headache. Maybe you get a stern email.
Right.
But in industrial construction, that friction isn't just an annoyance. It is literally the gap where fatalities happen.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the reason a single construction site requires 4 separate frameworks is that they each solve a totally different piece of the hazard puzzle. They aren't redundant, they're complementary.
Okay, break that down for us. How do they complement each other?
Well, ISO 45001 is entirely focused on the management loop, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It ensures the company is constantly evaluating and improving its safety protocols from the boardroom all the way down.
So it's the philosophy.
Exactly. But OSHA is your tactical playbook. OSHA doesn't care about your management philosophy. It cares about the specific tensile strength of your fall arrest harness. It cares about the exact sloping angle of your trench.
So where do the Factories Act and the BOCW Act fit in? Because they seem to exist to manage the human element within that machinery, especially given the historical context of industrial labor.
They absolutely do. The Factories Act provides the baseline legal duties for safe plant operations. It was born out of an era where static brick-and-mortar factories were the primary industrial hazard.
Right. Predictable hazard.
Yes. But construction is inherently transient. The hazards change daily. The workforce fluctuates constantly.
So that's why the Building and Other Construction Workers Act, the BOCW, was layered on top.
Precisely. It mandates human welfare specifically for transient laborers. It covers everything from maximum working hours to the absolute non-negotiable right to basic human facilities.
So when you fuse ISO, OSHA, BOCW, and the Factories Act together,
You get a system that theoretically manages the corporate strategy, the physical hazards, and the basic human dignity of the workforce.
it's a huge safety net. But to make that massive 4-layered net actually function in the real world, the manual assigns incredibly specific roles to 4 key tiers of management. Let's start by taking the view from the top.
The executives.
Exactly. The very first role the manual outlines is the general manager, or the GM. And the text describes this position as holding apex responsibility.
Apex responsibility.
I love that phrasing. They aren't on the ground checking whether someone is wearing safety goggles. They're handling the macro policy and allocating the financial resources to make the entire safety apparatus possible.
And that financial allocation is the absolute linchpin of the whole operation.
Because without money, none of this happens.
Right. Under ISO 45001, Clause 5.1, the GM is required to demonstrate what they call top management commitment. In the context of this site, that means they are the ones signing the checks.
So if the safety system needs specialized scaffolding,
Or high-end atmospheric testing equipment for a confined space, the GM has to fund it.
Yeah.
If they establish a strict safety policy but refuse to fund the execution of that policy, the entire ISO framework collapses during an audit.
wow.
Furthermore, they carry the ultimate legal accountability under Section 40 of the BOCW Act for big picture worker welfare.
And the manual specifies that this means ensuring the provision of massive welfare facilities. We're talking industrial-scale canteens, permanent restrooms, first aid infrastructure, and even crutches for the children of the workers.
Yeah, childcare facilities right there on the perimeter.
They are also tasked with ensuring comprehensive health insurance and ESI coverage across the board. Yet when it comes to the day-to-day accidents, a sprained ankle or a dropped tool, the GM stays entirely removed.
They do.
They only step into the investigative process for an executive-level post-incident review if there is a fatal or highly severe incident.
Which perfectly aligns with the concept of apex responsibility.
Right.
Their job is to set the organizational occupational health and safety policy, fund it, and then trust the next tier down to execute it relentlessly.
And that next tier down would be the project director.
Right.
The project director seems to be the crucial bridge between the theoretical policies of the boardroom and the muddy, chaotic reality of the actual construction site.
They carry the ultimate balancing act. The project director's core directive is project delivery. They're under immense pressure to get the facility built, hit the timeline milestones, and stay under budget.
But they have to do all of that without compromising the safety mandates handed down by the GM and the regulatory bodies.
Exactly. They're the ones establishing the site-specific project safety management plan, and they chair the monthly Project Safety Review Committee meetings.
And those aren't just casual meetings.
No, not at all. Those meetings are not casual catch-ups. They are formal, documented legal defense mechanisms where safety performance is ruthlessly scrutinized.
They also have some incredibly strict, mathematically triggered legal requirements to watch out for.
They do. Under BOCW Rule 209, the project director is legally required to appoint a formally qualified safety officer the moment the site headcount hits a specific threshold.
And what's that threshold?
If the project scales up to 250 workers, that is the trigger. 251 workers on site. You are legally operating outside of compliance until you have a dedicated certified safety officer on the payroll.
So they have to constantly monitor the headcount. And their role in an emergency is also tightly bound by a stopwatch.
Very tightly.
If a serious accident occurs, the project director is bound by Section 48 of the BOCW Act. They have exactly 24 hours to ensure the regional inspector is formally notified.
24 hours is nothing in the middle of a crisis.
Right. They also have a rigid 48-hour window to review any internal serious incident reports. So while the GM is analyzing long-term policy adjustments, the project director is managing the immediate legal and administrative fallout all while trying to keep the overall project from grinding to a halt.
It's a tremendous amount of pressure.
Here's where it gets really interesting because we are stepping out of the administrative offices and getting our boots in the mud. The third tier of the matrix is the project manager, or the PM. This is the primary operational leader on the ground.
The project manager is standing right in the crossfire of those 4 regulatory frameworks we talked about. They're the ones actively forcing safety integration into the actual physical activities happening on the dirt.
They're translating it.
Exactly. They're translating OSHA standards into daily work orders.
The manual places a massive amount of gatekeeping authority on the PM's shoulders. They are the sole authorization point for all permit-to-work systems.
This is a huge bottleneck, intentionally so.
If a subcontractor needs to perform high-stakes operations like confined space entry, complex lifting, deep excavations, or hot work like welding near combustible materials, they cannot move an inch until the project manager personally reviews the hazard controls and signs that permit.
And they also enforce a site-wide zero-tolerance policy for personal protective equipment violations.
Just absolutely no exception.
None. Enforcing PPE means they're auditing the issuance registers, inspecting the gear and ensuring that a cracked hard hat or a frayed harness is pulled from circulation and replaced immediately.
But the most staggering part of the project manager's role is the logistical spreadsheet they have to maintain regarding human welfare,
Oh, yeah, the ratios.
which is based strictly on a fluctuating daily headcount. The metrics mandated by the Factories Act and the BOCW Act create this massive logistical puzzle. For every 150 workers on site, the PM must provide exactly one fully stocked first aid box.
Okay.
Under BOCW Rule 40, they need one urinal for every 25 workers, and the law mandates separate segregated facilities for women.
And it scales up aggressively.
It does. If the site scales up past 250 workers, the PM has to ensure a functional hygienic canteen is operating. And if the headcount breaks 500, they are legally required to build and staff a dedicated ambulance room right there on the site.
Picture the real-world implications of those metrics. Construction workforces are highly elastic. You might have 220 workers on a Tuesday.
Totally compliant.
Right. But on Wednesday, you bring in a massive team of specialized subcontractors for a continuous concrete pour, pushing your headcount to 260.
Oh, wow.
If the project manager doesn't anticipate that spike, suddenly they're in violation of the law because they didn't provision the extra urinals, they didn't scale the canteen services, and they haven't formally appointed the safety officer required by Rule 209.
So the PM is constantly riding that mathematical edge, just watching the gate every morning. So the project manager is running this massive logistical spreadsheet, balancing permits, headcounts, and infrastructure. But someone actually has to be standing next to the trench, looking at the soil, making sure it doesn't collapse on the crew. Who takes on that granular level of oversight?
That falls to the fourth and final management tier. The site in charge, sometimes referred to as the project in charge. This is the individual staring the physical hazards right in the face, minute by minute.
The front line.
The absolute front line. Out of everyone in the organizational chart, this role carries the most intense, direct legal accountability for the safety of the workers at the actual point of execution.
So if something goes wrong.
Under BOCW Act Section 44, Factories Act Section 36, and the myriad of OSHA standards, if a localized hazard goes ignored and a worker is injured on the ground, the site in charge is the one legally on the hook.
And their liability starts before the heavy machinery is even turned on. The manual dictates they must conduct a toolbox talk, a targeted safety briefing, before every single shift begins.
Every single shift.
They are physically verifying that workers have their PPE on. And under BOCW Rule 212, they have the incredibly difficult task of verifying that workers are reporting to the site in a fit condition.
Which means?
Specifically, they have to ensure no one is intoxicated or fatigued before letting them onto the site.
Imagine executing that effectively at 6 a.m. with hundreds of workers streaming through the gates. It requires intense vigilance.
It really does.
And because of that immense responsibility, the manual grants them a critical unilateral power. The site in charge has the authority to immediately stop any work activity that poses an imminent danger.
They don't have to ask permission.
They do not need to pause and radio the project manager. They don't need to consult the project director's budget. If they spot an OSHA Section 13A imminent danger, like a shifting trench wall or a damaged crane cable, they have the absolute authority to shut down a multi-million-dollar operation right then and there.
That is real power. But just as the project manager is bound by welfare headcount ratios, the site in charge is bound by microscopic safety metrics. They are enforcing safety on the fly using exact measurements.
Very specific numbers.
Right. For instance, under OSHA 1926.501, any time a worker is exposed to a height of more than 1.8 meters, the site in charge must mandate full fall protection gear.
And for trenches.
Under BOCW Rule 92, if an excavation drops deeper than 1.5 meters, they must halt the digging until the trench is properly shored or sloped.
1.8 meters for a fall hazard, 1.5 meters for a trenching hazard. Those aren't arbitrary guidelines. Those are the strict legal boundaries drawn between standard operational work and a deadly sited hazard.
The site in charge basically has to act as a human tape measure.
You really do.
But wait, 1.8 meters. That is barely 6 feet. The idea that the site in charge has to strictly enforce mandatory harnesses and tie-offs for a drop that small really puts the intensity of this job into perspective. It requires a level of hypervigilance that is hard to sustain over a 12-hour shift.
It is incredibly taxing, which is exactly why this document culminates in a highly structured responsibility matrix at the very end. The manual literally contains a grid mapping out every conceivable safety task and assigning it to one and only one specific role.
The Matrix. I love this
Right.
part because, the bystander effect is a well-documented psychological phenomenon where people fail to act in an emergency because they assume someone else will handle it.
Right, diffusion of responsibility.
Exactly. In corporate structures, that same diffusion of responsibility can be lethal. If everyone on the management team is generally responsible for checking the scaffolding, then functionally, no one is checking the scaffolding.
Everyone assumes the other guy did it.
The Matrix is the absolute antidote to that ambiguity.
What's fascinating here is how the matrix distributes proactive duties versus reactive duties to prevent finger pointing.
Well,
Take the toolbox talks we just discussed.
okay.
The matrix designates the site in charge to conduct them daily. The project manager is assigned to conduct them weekly. The project director and the GM are marked completely not applicable.
So there's no confusion.
None. It isolates the communication stream so workers know exactly who is leading their daily safety posture.
Let's trace how this matrix acts as a pre-programmed nervous system during an actual crisis. Say the worst happens, a piece of scaffolding collapses, and a worker is severely injured. How does the matrix dictate the response?
The matrix completely replaces human panic with cold, pre-planned procedure. The moment that scaffolding falls, the site in charge instantly transitions into the primary first responder coordinator.
Because they're already on the ground.
Exactly. Their matrix assigned duty is to freeze the work area, preserve the incident scene, coordinate the immediate evacuation or ambulance response, and send the initial flash report to the project manager.
The matrix then shifts the burden. The project manager takes over the preliminary investigation. They don't have time to deflect. The grid dictates they have exactly 24 hours to analyze the scene, interview witnesses, and submit their investigative report up the chain.
From there, the project director receives the report and executes their mandate to notify the regional inspector within the 24-hour legal window.
Shielding the company.
Yes, shielding the company from compliance failure while managing the external communications. Finally, because it was a severe injury, the matrix pulls the general manager in for the final executive review.
To look at the big picture.
Right, forcing them to analyze if a systemic policy failure or lack of funding contributed to the collapse.
The beauty of that design is that in the chaotic, adrenaline-fueled aftermath of an accident, there is zero time wasted arguing over who is supposed to call the ambulance or who is supposed to document the scene. It is a coordinated reflex.
And that reflex is exactly what the ISO 45001 framework demands. An organization must pre-plan its reaction to its absolute worst-case scenarios, completely removing the variables of human panic or corporate self-preservation.
The philosophical core of this entire manual is summarized in a powerful declaration near the end, listed under their zero harm vision.
It's a great quote.
It really is. The
Absolutely.
text states, safety is not an accident. It is a result of constant attention, commitment, and shared responsibility at every level of management.
It is a striking mission statement. But the compliance team at ABM Pilavik clearly understands that mission statements don't stop accidents. Legally binding comprehension does.
That raises a really important question about enforcement, because the manual doesn't just end with that inspiring quote.
No, it has teeth.
It concludes with a mandatory 8-question training assessment that every key personnel member must pass. They are tested on the specific OSHA standards for fall protection, the exact ratios for first aid boxes, and the intricacies of the permit systems.
They'd have to prove they read it.
And then they must physically sign their name and designation to the document. They are legally acknowledging that they understand the precise boundaries of their liability.
So what does this all mean for us? They are signing on the dotted line, officially taking ownership of their specific slice of the matrix.
But that hyper-specialization introduces a really fascinating dilemma for you to consider as we wrap up today. The manual perfectly defines everyone's lane. The GM owns the policy. The site in charge owns the 1.8-meter fall rule.
Right.
But when you build a system with such rigid, highly specialized boundaries, does it actually create a perfectly synchronized machine? Or is there a hidden risk?
A blind spot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you define everyone's lane so perfectly, do people stop looking at the whole road? Does the structure inadvertently create a culture where a manager might walk past a glaring hazard simply because it technically falls into the other guy's column?
It's the ultimate paradox of hyper-accountability.
It is, and it is something to deeply consider the next time you interact with the compliance structures in your own profession. Are your systems keeping you safe by creating crystal clear accountability, or are they creating dangerous blind spots?
great question to leave them with.
Thank you so much for joining us for today's deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we will catch you next time.